Hello, welcome to episode 255 of the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1,001 movies you must see before you die, in conjunction with Asian Cinema Season 2. So, in this video I'm going to be talking about a film that is from the continent of Asia, is in the book 1,001 movies you must see before you die, and the film in question, you've already seen the title, is Once Upon a Time in China. Or, as I believe it was originally released, or at least the original Cantonese title, Wong Fei Hung, which is the name of the lead character and an actual person from Chinese history, who I believe was born in the 1800s, died in the early 1900s, and he was a legendary martial artist. He was a healer, he was a folk hero. Like, he was a very important and kind of storied character and person and figure who became the inspiration for dozens and probably hundreds, actually. I think there's over 100 different kind of movies, if not TV shows, adaptations, just kind of either bringing his real life to life on the small screen or the big screen, but also kind of dramatizing it and kind of punching it up with, the typical escapism that you can imagine with films where Jackie Chan and Jet Li are portraying this man and this martial artist. And so I don't know too much about the real Wong Fei Hung. All I knew really was that he was the main character in the 1978 film Drunken Master, with Jackie Chan playing the young kind of rambunctious, martial artist who has to get taught with all the different styles and drunken boxing and stuff. And that's a very kind of comedic and very martial arts heavy story. This, however, seems to be more of a, I don't want to say truer to real life, because I've tried looking into Wong Fei Hung like online very briefly, and there doesn't seem to be too much about him. Well, there is, and there isn't, but I'm sure that this is kind of a little bit closer to the truth. For one thing, Jet Li, who plays Wong Fei Hung in Once Upon a Time in China, does play him as a very stoic figure, as a healer. He's a physician, he helps people, he heals people, but he's also, martial arts kind of god, basically. And this film is directed by Tsui Hark, who is a figurehead of, Hong Kong cinema of the 1980s and moving into the early 90s. He's someone I'm very unfamiliar with, but I do know that he had quite an impact in the way that Hong Kong movies were kind of made and seen, and this was a really big success, Once Upon a Time in China. It spawned 5 sequels, I believe, which I think he did the second and third one, and maybe produced some of the others. I'm not entirely sure about that. Jet Li plays Wong Fei Hung for, I think, 4 of those movies, mainly the first 3, the trilogy, which I have from the Eureka Blu-ray box set. So I don't want this I don't want this video to be longer than it needs to be, but I do want to talk about my experience watching this film for the first time, not really knowing what to expect. And also, this whole series, the Epic Film Challenge 2, it isn't 1,001 videos of me reviewing, in a kind of scholarly and academic fashion every single film and judging them on their merits and analyzing them deeply. I tried to do some of that stuff. I tried to kind of look into the way these films are and what they might mean and the techniques used and how those work, how they don't work. I do try my best to kind of, quote unquote analyze these films a little bit, but also it is just my reactions to them and also my experiences, whether it be seeing one of these films in a cinema, watching it at home on Blu-ray, who I watched it with. I like to kind of add a personal touch to these videos. So for this one, unfortunately, it took me about 8 separate sittings to watch this film, and it isn't really relevant to the movie at all, but I had to mention it because it was my experience with it, and I'm really kind of ashamed with myself for that, because I put it on maybe a month ago, and I sat down and was like, right, this is my night. I'm going to watch this film. I'm looking forward to it. I watched it. I was really enjoying it. After about like an hour, I was getting a little bit sleepy, and I thought, I could just edit a video, set it to render, then come downstairs and watch the rest of it, and that'll be the rest of my night. And then I just never went back downstairs. So I thought, okay, I'll finish it tomorrow. Then the next day I watched half an hour, and I thought, I'll finish the rest tomorrow. I've already broken it up, so who cares? And then I just never got back to it. So then I came back to it maybe a few weeks later. I picked up where I left off, and then I thought, wait, where am I in the story again? And I rewound a little bit, and I thought, I forgot about that bit. That bit was so cool. And then I thought, do you know what? I need to be fair to this film, and I need to just sit down and watch it properly and give it my full undivided attention. So I rarely do this, but I actually went right back to the beginning and I watched it all over again. So the first hour of this film I have seen more than once now, because I felt like I needed to give it that time. And I'm glad that I did, because it's a great film that isn't without its flaws. I think this is a flawed masterpiece. And the flaws that I perceive are maybe not what most people would take as flaws in a movie. Things that don't necessarily impact the plot or even the way that the film is made. Just certain little chinks in the armor, I think, are where this film comes down just a tiny bit. It's not much, but to me it is worth mentioning, and I'll get to those flaws in just a second. So the film itself concerns Wong Fei-hung, and at the beginning of the film, actually, he's on a ship with a militia. There are a lot of terms here that I don't understand, and it is set in 1875, I believe, and it's Hong Kong, I believe. Foshan was the location. That's the main location of the film, but it is to do with the British rule of Hong Kong and how they came in and kind of took over. It's not really about that, but that is all over the film, and there's also an American presence there, and so you get a lot of white cast members who are shit actors, basically. This brings the film down somewhat because thankfully they're not in the film too much. When they are, they're just like awful. The dubbing isn't good. It's really, really bad. In fact, Connie came in at one point and she was watching it and she's like, "This is horrible." And I was like, "No, it's not. It's really good." And she's like, "No, like they've got these horrible like English actors coming in delivering these lines so badly, and yet the film looks amazing." Like, she was really impressed with the cinematography, and I don't even mean some of the prettier like moments of the film, just the general camera angles, the way this film is shot, the lenses that are used that give you that kind of wide angle view at times. She was really impressed by that, and she was kind of really annoyed that they cast, these white actors who weren't very good, and they just aren't. They really aren't. I don't think anyone could dispute that, and I do think it drags the film down just a tiny bit. And you can kind of say, well, they kind of had what they had. You gotta do the best with what you're given, but it is a shame that is a very weak element of the film. Whenever there's an American or a British character, it's very just like, "Hey, you over there," like just completely just ask a robot to give a line delivery, and it's somewhere close to what all of the white actors give in this film. And it's in the way that they kind of deliver their lines, in terms of like you can see their face and the way that they're emoting, but also I don't know if it's they did their own dubbing, probably not. They probably got someone else to do the English dubbing. So it's a combination of not believing, just like screwed up faces and just like over the top, and then the voice acting is really just like there as well. So that's kind of a shame. But it's to do with I'm going all over the place in this video. I apologize, but we'll get round to by the end of this video, hopefully I'll have all my thoughts down on this film. So Wong Fei-hung, at the beginning of the film, he's on a ship with kind of a mentor figure, I suppose, who never comes back into the film. Actually, I was expecting him to return. He leaves Wong Fei-hung with this the fans that open up, and there's a treaty written across it to do with peace. And so he entrusts it to Wong Fei-hung and says, "While I'm gone, look after the militia, keep training the men," and that sort of thing. So Wong Fei-hung has like this group of men who he trains in martial arts, but he also runs his kind of healing center, I suppose, where people come when they're sick, they have illnesses, and as the film progresses, when they have mortal injuries, because bullets fly very free and very fast in this world and in this time period, and that's a big part of the film, is the presence of this traditional and it's very beautiful at times and lyrical, like kung fu, and it's very the way that it's portrayed at times is really poetic, and the use of slow motion. And there's a character in the movie played by Yuen Biao. I might be pronouncing his name entirely wrong, but he's a great martial artist and actor who has been in many Jackie Chan films, and he's just fantastic. I was really glad to see him, because I knew that he's a great kind of martial artist and does great stunts. But his character, I forget his name, he comes into the story to be trained, I believe, by Wong Fei-hung. So he comes in to kind of, he's just this kind of almost kid who walks in off the street, and he wants to kind of, be taken under someone's wing. and he spots this man about maybe the first hour of the movie in the street, kind of performing this ritual where he takes these two daggers by his throat and just like snaps them with the force of his neck. And it's a beautiful scene. The rain is coming down, it's slow motion, and you're seeing this young guy who wants to be like a kung fu master, and he's seeing this man kind of doing this incredible feat, and you see from his perspective, I think, where the slow motion's coming in, and it's kind of almost like a hero worshipping view of kung fu at times, and that is celebrated throughout the film. But it is also, to get back to my original point, it is pushed against the presence of guns in this world. So we have the Americans, we have the British, they have their guns, their rifles. At times they will just open fire on some of the, the Chinese people, and it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe it was an American, maybe it was a British soldier, we don't know, so no one takes the blame, and it's like, it's really frustrating. And I like that the film has comedic moments. It certainly doesn't go as far as, say, a Jackie Chan, action epic in terms of some of the wacky humor, but it has its kind of funny moments and light-hearted feelings to some of the scenes. But there is this pathos to it at times, and you do get these slower moments. It is like a 2-hour plus movie, so it has the time to relax every now and then and give you these moments where the weight of everything is actually felt. And I do think Jet Li did a great job of portraying the stoicism of this character. I don't know how true he is to the real person, but judging him as we see him in the movie, Wong Fei-hung, a very noble man. I love the way that he has his arms behind his back for the most part when he's being challenged. He has this kind of open sensibility to him where he is so just and so right. And the police, I suppose you could call them, in the area, they're basically he's being framed throughout the film for all these different things that are going wrong. And so they're constantly breathing down his neck saying, we're going to arrest you and stuff. And he's like, look, I've done nothing wrong. I'm being framed. But if you want me to go, I will go quietly. Just let me attend to the injured first. He's just such a noble, pure character. And I think that Jet Li, we all know Jet Li is a pretty damn good martial artist and, can do great stunts on camera, but I was really impressed with his acting. I thought he really portrayed the character quite well. I mean, as I was saying, there are moments of humor. There's this one moment where he is reintroduced to someone he hasn't seen in a very long time, played by, I forget her name now. I think it was Rosamund Kwan, perhaps. She plays 13th Aunt. Or Aunt. So 13th Aunt. I don't know, which do I say? Aunt or Aunt? I don't know, but either way. There's one of those weird things in these films where people get called uncle and aunt, and you think, is that their literal uncle or aunt? Or is it just like, kind of a colloquial kind of thing? I don't know. But I have read in the booklet for this release that she is the 13th aunt of Wong Fei-hung, but not by blood. So it's one of those kind of old school kind of traditions, I suppose, where she's vaguely linked. Like, I think her grandfather and Wong Fei-hung's grandfather were blood brothers, and so she's his 13th aunt. She very clearly has a thing for him, and he's like, well, we're related, even though they're not. So I was texting to a friend like, yeah, it's one of those weird, things in, the Hong Kong films where the lead character's love interest is maybe his aunt, but it turns out she's not actually his blood relative. But she comes into the film, and she's with someone who she met in the West somewhere, who's white and speaks English, and she says, how do you do? And Wong Fei-hung's like, do? How do I do? Like, he's confused by this. And so a friend of his says, just say thank you. And so Wong Fei-hung goes, I kill you, I kill you, I kill you. I don't know if that was meant to be like a joke. I mean, it must be, right? But like, he's got this big grin on his face. He's like, I kill you, I kill you. So right at the beginning, I thought, okay, this is going to be like a real comedy. But it isn't really, as you go throughout the film. There are these moments, but I think that's almost like the broadest moment of humor in the entire film is the I kill you moment, which still cracks me up now. But anyway, for what it's worth, there's all these things going on. There's a local gang who are involved in human trafficking. They're luring Chinese people in to go to America, to go to San Francisco. They're saying, pay us all your money, and you can come with us, sign a 3-year contract, you'll go to San Francisco. In America, there's gold lining the streets, just waiting for someone to come and scoop it up. All you have to do is walk into America, oh my god, there's gold in your pockets, like, it's amazing. So they sell these Chinese people on this American dream that is pure slavery. And actually we get to see a character who escapes from this and comes back, and he's in such a state, and that's when they realize what's been going on. So there's all these different groups they're kind of involved in this. It's a very dense plot in that sense, but I think watching the first hour a second time kind of made me a bit more, I had a firmer footing in some of the things that were going on, but telling it to you now on camera, maybe not conveying to the best of my ability all the characters and where they figure into everything. But I did really enjoy Wong Fei-hung's character as portrayed by Jet Li, and the man who bent the daggers on his throat and snapped them. He is this kind of mythical figure almost, because you see him through the eyes of Yuen Biao's character. He's like looking up to him like, wow, this guy's amazing. It reminded me a little bit of Seven Samurai, the young samurai who's so amazed by the master swordsman. Like he's in love with him, and he sees him later on in this really cool fight scene, set kind of at night, and there's like a big bonfire going on, and we see this Master Yim, I think his name was, Iron Cloth perhaps, but Master Yim becomes a much bigger part of the film in the second half, and I started to realize, oh, he's like an equal for Wong Fei-hung. Because most people are scared of Wong Fei-hung. Even the gang who are part of the human trafficking, they're pretty fearful of Wong Fei-hung. I mean, they want to kill him probably, but there's one point where they're like, Wong Fei-hung's coming. They're like, oh shit, and they just run. So there's a reverence there for him, but also this is a guy who has such an expert level of kung fu and martial arts, whatever form that it is. I'm not too knowledgeable on that I started to think, oh, this film is giving you Wong Fei-hung here, and we're giving you Master Yim here, and at the end we're going to put these two together. And so they get involved and twisted into all the other characters and all the other things that are going on, and it all comes to a head in this incredible finale by the harbor, which is incredible. It's one of the coolest fight scenes I've ever seen, and here's where one of the flaws of the film come into it. And I did read up on this, but at first I was really disappointed because a lot of the fight scenes in this film with Jet Li are not Jet Li. And that could be one of the curses of high definition. I don't think you'd notice this on VHS or even DVD, but blown up onto a big TV in high definition, you see that Jet Li isn't doing a lot of this stuff. And it's even really simple things where it's just he's standing in the background and it's clearly not Jet Li. There's a moment where at the end of the film there's a big fight in kind of a barn type building, and there's wooden ladders everywhere, and it's such an amazing sequence. But at one point you see Master Yim, and in the background, slightly out of focus, you see Wong Fei-hung standing on the ladder waiting for him to come back and continue the fight. But you can see that it is not Jet Li, and he's just standing on a ladder. There's nothing dangerous about what's going on there. So it was like, why is this like stuntman becoming a stand-in? And it was really taking me out of the fight because there's incredible choreography, and there's like also they're flipping around. You can see the wires a few times, which I can let that stuff go. But there was just so much of it where it wasn't Jet Li, and I thought, I don't understand this, because there are scenes or kind of shots throughout the fight sequences in the film where you can tell that it's Jet Li for sure, and his skill and his speed is unbelievable. He can do that stuff, but he wasn't for a lot of the film, and I just thought, what a shame, because it really was. It was taking me out of it, because I felt like I'd been invested in Jet Li as Wong Fei-hung, and now I'm seeing someone else playing Wong Fei-hung in this fight scene, and then occasionally a close-up of Jet Li, and I was just a little bit disappointed by that, and it did take me out of the fight sequence a little bit. And I read afterwards that he hurt his knee really badly making this film and had it in plaster, so a lot of stuff they had to film from the waist up, and other stuff would have to be a stunt double, which is a real shame, because I do think that it just... And I've also been conditioned throughout this Asian cinema season to all the films I've been watching and digging into martial arts a little bit deeper than I ever have before in my life. A lot of Jackie Chan stuff, and in one of my Bruce Lee reviews I was talking about how, I'd become so accustomed to Jackie Chan's style that seeing the Bruce Lee stuff wasn't as impressive. And it is unfair to compare the two because it's two completely different styles. But I feel like Jet Li's style and the style of the martial arts and the action in Once Upon a Time in China is comparable to some of the Jackie Chan action films. And in that sense, I've grown accustomed to seeing this lead star doing 99% of his own stunts, and here we're seeing someone who's doing maybe 60%, and so it was just like and it is you shouldn't compare them, but I couldn't help but do that, and it did just kind of lurch me out of the main fight at the end a little bit. And even throughout the entire film, it's not just the main fight at the end, but because the main fight at the end is so long and has so many moving parts and cuts and shots, that's where it's most obvious, I think. But if he got injured, it's a big production, a lot of sets and stuff. It's just one of those things where you're not always able to wait for the lead actor to become better again to film everything. With Jackie Chan, he'd become such a juggernaut and became so rich that he was able to just put a production on hold for months if he needed to recuperate from an injury. Or, Tom Cruise, breaking his leg in Mission Impossible Fallout. They had the money really to say, okay, we can kind of stop for a bit here and whatnot. But clearly they didn't have the option to do that here. I'm sure they would have if they could have. But anyways, but the fight scene is great, and it's worth the price of admission alone. The way the ladders are used, even their first confrontation, Yim and Wong Fei-hung, they meet at his building, Wong Fei-hung's kind of healing center, we'll call it. I don't know, his house. And in the courtyard, it's raining, and they're fighting, and their feet are kind of like slowly moving around in the water and the rain, and it's so brilliantly done. And then they snap off a massive, I think it's like a bamboo kind of huge pole, and they're kicking it towards each other, and it's flying to, and then they're spinning around and then kicking it back, and it's like a game of keep me up with a football, but with like this massive bamboo pole that's flying towards each other, and there's slow motion, there's flourishes. It's unlike anything I'd seen before, and I thought it was just brilliant. A lot of the Chinese characters I really enjoyed. Some of his disciples, there was Toothbrush was the nickname of the one. I liked his arc throughout the film. I really enjoyed the character that Yuen Biao played as well, because he had an arc where he just wanted someone to be his mentor, basically. And he didn't, with all the stuff going on, he couldn't quite find that in Wong Fei-hung, and so he ended up following Master Yim, who goes down a different path where he is not too concerned with the morality of everything, whereas Wong Fei-hung he's all about the morality of everything. So you have these two men who are absolute masters of their craft, and this young man has chosen to follow the wrong one. And so we get to see him, by the end of the film, kind of do the right thing. But there's some really kind of distressing stuff in the third act of the film when the 13th aunt, she's really good throughout the film too, and I liked her relationship with a lot of the characters and how she plays into the ending of the film, because I knew by the end that this was going to be she was going to be the piece of the puzzle to bring these two characters together at the end, because she'd been kidnapped, and that they want to save her. So she is used as this kind of piece to be put there in the enemy camp to be taken out and rescued, and that's what gets all the characters together. And she gets she gets brutalized, really. It's not too harsh compared to some things that we would see now in films, in recent years, but there is a lot of implication of rape and kind of, the way that they spit in her face and stuff. It's really it's nasty stuff, and so, you really get drawn into seeing these bad guys get their comeuppance at the end of the day. And so, it did get to the point where one of the gang members was given a very grisly end, and I was like, fucking yes, kill him, it was one of those things where I was just like, I'm ready to see that guy meet a grisly end, because he deserved it from what he did earlier on in the film. The cinematography is there's great scenes, like the opening credits are Wong Fei-hung and all of his disciples training on the beach, at sunset or sunrise. Beautiful stuff, but even just the general camera angles, the lenses that were used, I'm not familiar with that kind of stuff, but there's this kind of wide effect that you do see a lot in kind of Hong Kong action films from the 80s and maybe back to the 70s too, I'm not too sure, but around that period it was kind of it's a signature thing that I've picked up on, having seen quite a few of them now. There's a lot of that stuff in A Chinese Ghost Story, for example, which is fairly close to this, at least in spitting distance in terms of when it was made. And I think so anyway, I think it was late 80s, but regardless, there's this wide angle look that it's just so fitting to this kind of period piece, but also with a kind of poetic flourish of martial arts. And the use of slow motion, maybe too much. And actually this contributes to one of the flaws of the film. So genuine slow motion is when the camera is filming at a certain rate to make it look really nice in slow motion, to be very basic about it. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but if you take a regular piece of film of someone walking down the street and then you slow it down afterwards, there's a kind of a jittery kind of thing to it. Like it isn't like a clean slow motion clip. And you see that a lot in films where they've decided to slow it down and it just doesn't look very good. But if they've decided, like on the day, this needs to be a slow motion shot, they'll film it in slow motion at that frame rate and it just looks beautiful. And there's so much of that in this film. But there are a few moments in this film where they didn't film it in slow motion and they slowed it down after the fact. And then they even go back to normal frame rate, like in the same shot, and it just doesn't look very good. And so I'll get into some of the flaws of the film, and it's these little micro details, and I don't know if it's to do with the restoration of the film, perhaps. I mean, it's only from 1991. It's a brand new 4K restoration, so I don't know if there were missing frames or something, but every now and then there'd be like a character stops, and then like it's just like a still frame for like a few seconds, and then like the next scene begins. I don't know if that's like they've lost a few frames from the original film negative or something, or whether that's the way that it was shown. But there's even bits where, I mean, there's one in particular I'm thinking of near the end of the film where a character is running away from all the bad guys, and he runs down underneath this stairway, and they're all chasing after him, and he runs under the stairway, and then he kind of just stops, and then the people chasing him kind of like stop, because it's the end of the take, and that's still in the film, and it's like, oh my god. So I don't know if it's like the editor should be responsible for these little micro things that I think, that's a shame. You know, because that was a big one. I was like, oh, I'm really into this. And wait, he just stopped. Why did they stop? And then, you know, it's a very like blink and you'll miss it moment, but I caught it and it just seemed a bit like, that's something you catch in editing. You just shave off a few frames and it's gone. And then the flow of the scene continues, you know. But then there are these incredible pieces of editing with all of these different shots in the fight sequences. So I don't know. There's just these little bits and pieces where it just, you know, I don't know. I'm going to leave this kind of fumbling in because it's hard to express. And I do think it's being too nitpicky. I will completely own up to that, hold my hands up. I think it is being nitpicky of me to, you know, take these against the film because they're very minor. They're not even issues. They're just minor little things that I just think, you know, you can clean that up and then there's no distractions, you know, and you can just focus on the great stuff. But every now and then there's just these few things like the slow motion that's not real slow motion, you know, frames here and there that just seem to stop, and then the flow to the next scene isn't as good. Things like that, I suppose, that just they threw me off a little bit. And then even the stunt doubles being really visible, but there wasn't really much they could do about that. So anyway, I'm just trying to like give you the broader spectrum of my thoughts on the film, and certainly those little minor flaws were very much on my mind as I was watching, and I did think it was a shame. I do think the film can be enjoyed regardless. I don't really think it does harm the film, but for me it did distract me at times. So maybe when I watch it again, I'll just need to kind of put the goggles on and forget about that stuff and just enjoy the film for what it is, and maybe I'll enjoy it even more in that sense. But there's a lot of great fight scenes and, you know, great little moments and little kind of micro beats that are really fun. Some good humor, and some good character stuff as well. I really enjoyed the characters and where they go in the story, and you know where it plays into it by the end. It's just a really, really enjoyable film, an action epic. The music is really good. Like I love the kind of the main theme, I guess, at the beginning with the opening credits. And yeah, this is an ambitious film, and I think for the most part it really pulls off what it's trying to do. And there are a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts. And you get what you pay for in terms of the action scenes, but I think the action scenes are actually pretty perfectly paced throughout the 2 hour plus running time, because I've certainly encountered at this point martial arts films that they throw too much at you. This was just the right amount, and when there are fight sequences, they can be breathtaking, and for the most part they end before it gets to the point where it outstays its welcome. It always, throughout the entire film, I think every fight scene and every moment of kind of you know, a little fight scene or action moment, it always ends just as I'm wanting more, you know, and I want to see more of that. And then it kind of holds you off until the end, and then they cut the chains loose and give you this like 10-15 minute action extravaganza, and it's just like, it's the perfect way to do it, I think. There's some really shocking moments in the film. There's this pretty much a massacre, I would say, which is really hard to watch at times, and I don't know if I should say it's a good thing, but there is this moment at a theater where a performance is going on, and I don't know if it's the British or the American, you know, men, they open fire on just the public, you know, and it's brutal. And there's fight scenes going on in between all of that, and so you're kind of like being wowed by the action, but then it will cut back to these people just getting shot. And again, I didn't want to say that it's a good thing, but we see those bullets hit, we see squibs go off, we see actual the kind of spurt of blood. It looks like someone is being shot. And certainly in Jackie Chan films, I would say, you see people getting shot and they're like, oh, and they fall over, and you don't really register that. You don't feel that someone's actually been shot and killed. Here, you feel it, and then afterwards you have him trying to heal these people and taking the bullets out. So the violence and also the way that the guns in the film are treated as mortally dangerous, I guess, is really well conveyed in that scene, because you're seeing these people getting shot. And while it's horrible, you're really feeling every bullet, because you're seeing it kind of pop and puff out of their clothes, and it's like, oh my God, And so anyway, so that was the thing that was really effective about the film. And it didn't overdo it, it didn't over milk it either. So the way that guns were used and that kind of idea of the guns and the kung fu, and also in general just the Western culture encroaching on China. The 13th Ant is trying to get Wong Fei-hung to get a suit made, and he's like, I don't want to wear a suit, I'm not from the West, I don't want to kind of conform to what they're doing. And she's like, well, their science is a lot better than ours, or their technology, they've got the steam engine, they've got this, they've got that, they bring a camera in, and she has a camera throughout the film, and people are kind of almost confused about it, or at least to the point where Wong Fei-hung it kind of malfunctions and he moves someone out of the way, and kind of the puff from the camera comes and comedically kills a bird, so it shows you the Western stuff coming in and how it's not really working for them, but how ultimately they can't avoid it. They don't want to accept it, but it is becoming, it's overpowering them, literally. So you can look at that just from the plot of Guns versus Fist, but you can also look at that in general and the way that the British were kind of ruling at that time as well. So certainly for me, I am a complete novice, even less than that, on like the politics and the history of Hong Kong and the British rule and everything like that. But that is certainly an element of the film that is there for the people who want to look for it. But it's pretty overt. It's all throughout the film. That whole presence is felt very strongly, I think. Anyway, that's a lot of talk about this film. I thought it was for the most part fantastic. I will definitely return to it. I was very impressed by Jet Li, and I would recommend it. Is it a film you should see before you die, though? That is the question. Yes, I think it is. For a film like this, a period martial arts epic, it's pretty damn spectacular, and it does a lot of things right. There's a few things that just hold it back from being that kind of 5-star kind of classic for me, but I do think that it's well worth anyone's time, and there's so many great moments, whether it be visually beautiful or the actual fight scenes themselves, or even just certain character moments, I think really make it a worthwhile film to check out, even if you're not into martial arts so much, because I'm not really a fanatic for this kind of stuff, but I do really enjoy it. And I do think that to mount a production of this scale, to make it feel like the period that it's set in as well, like the costume design and everything is really well done, the sets, but also it does all that right, and then it also takes great fight sequences and just like doles them out perfectly, I think, throughout the entire film, and that makes all the difference. I've seen certain films like Drunken Master where it's just fight scene, fight scene, fight scene, dialogue, fight scene, dialogue, fight scene, and you just get overwhelmed and you get worn out of it. It's so well done in this film, maybe more well done than in most martial arts films I've seen. The fight scenes count, they register, and the threat of the guns registers, and so you're just really invested in everything. And so I just thought it was a brilliant film. So I do think it's a film you should see before you die. Leave me your thoughts down below if you have seen the film, what you thought of it, and I will see you in the next one.